hey, someone's playing the tabla, someone's playing the drums. Like I really like that kind of rhythm. Back then it was like techno, trance,
Right.
R&B. I would start listening
Yeah.
to that. And then I slowly started to think, hey, what if song A goes with song B? I think during my childhood in Zambia, I did have a really strong Tamil community. I did not know the difference between Purdue versus California versus
Okay.
Miami or
Okay.
New York. It was truly invigorating and intriguing experience because I've never seen that many Tamil people show up for a club until 5 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
Everybody that knows me from the DJ scene and the music scene calls me G-TAM.
Welcome to the arrambam show. And with us today, we have G-TAM, otherwise known as Gautam Murali. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a fun episode from the perspective that we had the opportunity to meet this past October, right? We got connected through ROM and you flew in all the way from Chicago to come throw a banger on our October event. And I mean, you really shut that one out. So that was like epic there.
Yep. No, that was a great experience. Thank you so much for having me there at the Double Meetup show. It was truly invigorating and intriguing experience because I've never seen that many Tamil people show up for a club until 5 o'clock in the morning just to belt out to all the so-called Tamil bangers and cut the music and all of that.
Right, right. And I mean, that was like to us in some regard, that was like a 12-hour experience because if you remember, we got there around like 7, 8 p.m. to get set up, do sound checks because we had the
Yep.
artists performing, right? And then the party started at 9. If you remember, there were people who started coming in at like 8:30, 8:45, being like, oh, let me get in before the rush. And then it was just like, as soon as like 9:30 hit, the room was full, everyone was ready to go. And we went, like you said, until 4 or 5 a.m. there. It was insane.
Yeah, no, I remember that vividly because my mom called me and she's like,
Oh,
"Hey, are
really?
you in New York?" And I stepped out and I saw the line out the door and I was like, "Oh, okay, crap!" And this is like at 8:45, 9 o'clock at night.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. Wait, is your mom here in America or like in New York
No,
area?
no, my parents all live in Zambia, so that's where I'm
Oh, okay.
originally from. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, sweet. So we'll get into that. We'd love to hear more about that. But before we get started, I think most people know you, but for those who may not, or to give us all a refresher, who is G-TAM? Who are you?
G-TAM is a dual personality between Gotham and G-TAM, right?
Okay.
Everybody that knows me from the DJ scene and the music scene calls me G-TAM, right?
Mhm.
That's the persona they know.
Mhm.
Everybody else that is my long-term friends, childhood friends, everybody knows me as Gautam, right? So
Yeah.
they know only that side of it. So now there's that overlap in that Venn diagram that know both G-TAM and Gautam, and they're like, okay, so what do we call you now? Do we call you G-TAM because you're a DJ? Do we call you Gautam because we know you from before, right?
All
So
right, all
there's
right, all right.
so there's that piece, but a little bit about myself, right? So I was born in Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu. Yay, CBE, if you're from there. And then I moved to Zambia, Africa, back when I was 3 years old. So I did all my K through 12, all my schooling up to high school there. And then I moved
Nice.
to United States and I went to Purdue for my
Mhm.
undergrad.
Nice.
Soon after that, started working here in the US, went back to grad school, and now I'm here back working in Chicago.
Sweet. I mean, to that point, you're wearing a Purdue sweatshirt, right? Aren't you right now?
Yeah, go Boilerplate Makers.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you've been literally all over the world in some regard, right? From all the way Coimbatore, right, where I'm also from.
Okay,
I don't know if we've talked about this. My parents are from Polachi and Erode. So
okay.
spend whenever I go back home, technically spending a lot of time in Coimbatore. So that's awesome. And then you spent time in Zambia, and then you made it to America. So I have the next question to you, right? And this will be I will add an adjustment here. Is my next question was going to be what does being Tamil mean to you? And since you've been all over the place and been in the heart of Tamil Nadu in Coimbatore, but then in Zambia now Chicago, it's like I'm curious how has being Tamil or what Tamil and Tamil, your Tamil identity, your culture, how has that evolved over your time, and especially spending in these different environments? Here, so
No, that's actually a
basically,
that's a good question, man. So, what does Tamil mean to me, right? Like, what does being Tamil mean to me? I think it's not just speaking the language; it's embodying the culture, right? I think that's
mhm,
what being Tamil means to me, right? So, think of all of these things like your Varalakshmi pujas and
right,
your Diwali and all of those kind of Navratri celebrations and everything like the
of course,
Golu setup and all of those kind of things, right? So those are
of
things
course,
that I partake in terms of what Tamil is to me. And
hmm
then given that, I have such a varied cultural diaspora, right?
yeah,
Coimbatore to Zambia to US to, a little bit of the Middle East and so on and so forth. It's
oh,
like I
okay,
get
yeah,
to meet Tamil people from all around the world, right?
hmm
That are not just from like Tamil Nadu, India, but are also from like Sri Lanka, like Elam Tamils and
of
folks like
course,
that, right? So there's a lot of like variation in terms of how people perceive Tamil as a culture, Tamil as a language, and Tamil as kind of an education in some sense too, right? Like those, I've
hmm
had people that are masters of arts in Tamil literature, and I'm like, okay, I have no idea what that means, but
yeah,
I respect you for taking that Tamil culture to that like extent. I've met a lot of people in my stride so far,
okay,
that are from like your Chennai,
hmm
Pollachi, Erode, Madurai, Coimbatore type of folks. I've met folks from like Jaffna, Colombo, so on and so forth
hmm
as well. I've met folks that are Tamil people that originally were born in, Chennai but grew up in Kuwait, Doha,
hmm
Dubai. I've met some folks from Malaysia, Singapore, some from Australia, right? So
right,
it's a very varied culture, and there's one common factor here.
hmm
Everybody is proud to be Tamil, right? There's
hmm
no
hmm
shame or there's no reservations in saying, hey, I am Tamil and I grew up in Australia, or I am Tamil and I grew up in Zambia, right? There's no reservations there, but the common factor is I am Tamil, and that's what
right,
people embody a lot, whether it's through the food they make, right? Like idli sambar, or whether the clothes they wear, like your panchakacham veshti, or the
hmm
cultural and religious practices that they follow, like getting your punal done, or doing like a some kind of a what is it? I forget the actual term. The one where like the girl gets pregnant and you're kind of
oh
embodying
yeah,
that.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
like.
like the new
Yeah, I
motherhood
forget the
welcome. Yeah,
term.
yeah,
I
yeah,
forget the term.
exactly.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
not a baby. It's not a baby shower, but I forget the term. Yeah,
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 exactly.
yeah.
Or even like
Valagape,
during
valagape,
Valagapu, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
valagape.
When you do the
Yeah,
Valagapu, or you do have
yeah,
a Nichadatam, and those kind of
right,
cultural traditions, right? Whatever
right.
they choose to follow, it's
Yeah,
always coming down to I am Tamil, so I'm following all of these things.
of course, right. And that's really interesting. You say that, right? Because in many regard, Tamil has evolved in some regard beyond just, of course, everyone's Hindu, but it's revolve beyond just the religion from the regard that many of the traditions find their roots in Tamil culture, right? Where it's like
Hmm.
they may have some form of religious significance, they have some form of tie to the gods, but it's like, okay, we're doing this because not just because we're Hindu, because we're Tamil, and we're going to embody the Tamil festivals and traditions into our lives and into the way we move about life there.
Yeah, no,
Nice.
that's totally fair, and I've seen that not just with Tamil folks that are Hindu, but Tamil folks
Mm-hmm.
that have taken up other cultures like
Yeah.
Buddhism, Jainism,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Christianity, so on and so forth. They still come back to, for example, every year back home when I was growing up, there used to be a Tamil Sangam like December festival, which was
Mm-hmm.
the culmination of Diwali and the beginning of Christmas, right? So it would
Nice.
be a mixture of there's some acts that are devoted to like the Hinduism region, which is like the Diwali and all of that, the
Yeah.
Navaratri, Kartike Deepam, all of that. Then there's also different portions of the same program that are like welcoming the December month for Christianity, right? Like
Hmm.
celebrating Jesus's birthday, and so on and so forth, right? Which was
Right.
all like singing your Christmas carols, but like the Tamil versions of those, right? And we would
Hmm.
all sing that together as kids growing up collectively.
That's
So it
awesome.
wasn't like, hey, you're a different religion, I'm a different religion, I'm not going to do what yours, or you're not going to
Right.
do or partake in mine. It was all just a collective ensemble.
Right. So remind me, where was this? This was in
This,
Coimbatore?
this was back in Zambia.
Oh, Zambia. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's super super interesting, and I appreciate how, especially when Tamil people and the Tamil community goes to other countries, right? They still stay true to the Tamil culture in some regard, and it's very inclusive in that regard. So it's amazing to hear that. The next question that I think is a build off of what we just talked about is, I mean, of course you're in Coimbatore, but like thinking about Zambia and then coming to America, what has your Tamil community look like? Like, do you feel like you've had strong Tamil community and friends in Zambia, especially, and then once you came here to America, what did that look like?
Yeah, I think during my childhood in Zambia, I did have a really strong Tamil community. My parents were part of the local Tamil Sangam. It's
Is there
called
a lot of
Zambia.
Tamil people there in
Yeah,
Zambia?
there's quite a lot,
Okay.
especially when I was growing up back in the 90s, it was much smaller. But
Hmm.
now there's a lot more, I would say, expansion in terms of the Tamil community, right?
That's
There's lots more
incredible.
folks that are coming in either from India, Malaysia, any other country to Zambia.
Hmm.
And, they're setting up their lives there, right? So these are
Yeah.
some folks that came in the early 2000s or early 2010s. So they're
Hmm.
fairly new, whereas my family and I have been there since the early 90s, right? So
Yeah.
we're according to the Tamil Sangam there, we're considered the old school or the OGs there that helped start up the entire Sangam. Yeah.
Of course, of course. That's incredible. That's incredible. And so, I mean, like you said, that's grown since then.
Yeah, it has grown and things, have evolved because back when I was growing up,
Hmm.
things like a Bharatanatyam and Arangetram were
Hmm.
very, very few per year. We had
Hmm.
one Bharatanatyam teacher that was from, I believe, Colombo, Sri Lanka, and she was
Hmm.
teaching Bharatanatyam to all of the kids at the time. So my sister was part of that. And then
Nice.
I learned tabla, dol, dolak, like all of these like Hindustani instruments from a
Right.
Gujarati teacher,
Oh
but he
wow.
still taught me how to play different between a Carnatic song versus a
Mm.
Hindustani song, right? So
Mm.
there was a lot of bifurcation there in terms of how you play the instrument or how you dance to the song, but ultimately it was still embracing the overall homage to the culture.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Amazing. And so then that makes a lot of sense, right? Having a strong Tamil culture, Tamil community, but also just broader than Tamil. It's like I would say a South Asian
Yeah.
community in Zambia allowed you to embrace, like your sister to do Bharatanatyam, you to do music through the instruments, right? So how was that then how was your experience when you came to America? I'm curious. Then.
Yeah. So when I came to America, I remember it was a culture shock for me, right?
Mm,
Freshman
okay.
year,
Right.
undergrad, you're in a dorm with a random roommate. It's like,
Straight to
how do you
Purdue, right? Straight
straight
to
to
Purdue in the
Purdue
middle of the country.
in the middle of the country, right? I did
Yeah.
not know the difference between Purdue versus California versus
Okay.
Miami or
Okay.
New York, right? So that
Okay.
was my knowledge at the time.
Right.
I still took it in stride and I started to get involved with like your local ISA or SASA or
Mm-hmm.
whatever that Indian organization is called at the
Mm-hmm.
university, right? But a lot of times I met a lot of North Indians when I used to say, "Hey, I am South Indian." They would kind of be looking at me in a very weird way, being like, he's Indian, but he's not our type of Indian," right? So there was that little
Mm.
bit of reservation there.
Okay.
But soon
Okay.
enough, as I was going through like college, undergrad, I started to meet
Right.
a lot more South Indians that became more of my close friends. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't just within Purdue, it was across
Right.
the country, right?
Okay.
So I did meet a lot of folks as part of the different dance teams that I was part of, like
Mm-hmm.
Bhangra, Ras,
Mm-hmm.
Fusion, Bollywood Fusion, all of those. I was pretty much into dancing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would go to these competitions and everything, you would get a name like, for example, uh, Rohan, but the last name would be like a South Indian last name, right? And you'd be like,
Right.
hey, your last name seems South Indian. Are you South Indian? You'd be like, yeah, man, my parents are from Bangalore. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. My parents are from Coimbatore. Like, hey, let's build that connection. So
Right.
you'd
Right.
have that kind of stuff there.
Nice. Nice. That's awesome because I would say that's very similar to my experience going to college. So I went to school up in
Hmm.
Boston, a small school called Babson, and it was most of the South Asian population. I mean, most people were from India, and we just in general had an international population, like a significant amount of international students. And yeah, it was mostly North Indian, right? And they knew, I think they know what Tamil was, but it was like okay, like one, I did speak Hindi. I don't actually to that point. Do you speak Hindi, or do you know how to speak Hindi now?
I can understand Hindi, but my
Okay,
Hindi, when I speak it, it's a very like broken Hindi, right?
right,
Like I
right,
mix up the masculine versus feminine conjugations and everything. So
right.
I still get made fun of, but not to that extent.
Not to that extent. Yeah, I think I mean, I don't really speak Hindi. I can kind of understand it just from watching all the movies and having so
Yep.
many friends who would speak Hindi around me, right? Just like kind of started picking up on words. But yeah, that's totally true. And I think over time started making more and more either South Indian or Tamil Telugu friends, right?
Mhm.
So that's awesome. And so next, I think you were talking about how you got into the dance circuit, which is an awesome segue into just talking about your music journey, right? Because I feel like from what I've heard and what you've told me is that that's where it got started. So can you walk us through that? So I know you said, hey, you had some music background learning Hindustani instruments, but also having like a Carnatic flair to it, right? While you're in Zambia. So, what has your music journey been? How did it get started? What has music been to you?
So my music journey, right? It started when I was probably around 7, 8 years old.
Hmm.
I first started learning how to play the harmonium,
Nice.
albeit
Wow.
I was not really good at it. And
Okay.
then I would be always have that kind of corner of my eye, like, hey, someone's playing the tabla, someone's playing the drums. Like I really like that kind of rhythm.
Right.
Here it's all melody, right? So I was
Yeah.
not much into the whole melodic type of music. I was more into the percussion, rhythm,
Hmm.
like the beat.
Hmm.
That's what got me going. So I quickly switched from harmonium to tabla, and then I started learning tabla, dole, dolak, drums, rhythm
Hmm.
pads, all of that. And I would play with local artists that came through to Zambia to put on a cultural show. And then every year we would have what we call a bhajan sammelan, right? Which is basically a culmination of various bhajans for the various Hindu deities. And
Nice.
each team would have like 30 minutes or 45 minutes on stage. So it was kind of like a bhajan concert, so
Nice.
to speak,
Okay.
during the day.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
started there. Then slowly after that, I moved. When I was in middle school, I started listening to a lot more English songs, right? So your electronic dance music back then, it was like techno, trance, R and
Right.
B, like your Ja Rule, your Tiesto, your Dr. Dre, all of the LL Cool J, like all of them. I would start listening
Yeah.
to that, and then I slowly started to think, hey, what if song A goes with song B, right? And we had cassette tapes back then. It wasn't
Hmm.
even a like an actual turntable. It was just one cassette player with two decks, deck A, deck B. I'm pretty sure you probably remember that from
Yeah.
your early days.
Of
So
course.
that's how I started my music journey of how to remix songs.
Okay.
Then I came to Purdue and I started off being like, okay, let me get into the first South Asian scene, which is by joining one of the organizations or the clubs
Hmm.
on campus. Then let me get involved in the dance portion of it. Then I joined the Bunga team my freshman year, and they had me playing dole for all of their routines on
Okay.
stage. So we went to a couple of competitions, didn't place much, but it was still a good experience for me. And while I was doing that, I also joined the Bollywood fusion team of freshman year.
Nice. Nice.
So I did that for about a year and a half, 2 years. Junior year, I joined the Ross team because I was like, I want to go and compete more. And
Okay.
that's where I developed more of the flair that I had in middle school, high school of mixing, and I
Okay.
brought that back, right, in my
Yeah.
musical journey, because I would listen to all of these songs, never knew what a word meant because they were all Gujarati songs, and I'm a South Indian on a Gujarati team, which again, like you say, you can imagine doesn't make much sense, but that's where I started. So
Right.
I
Right.
perfected the dance. Started doing mixes for teams. And the first team I ever made a mix for was for Purdue Ross, which was my home
Okay.
team, my alma mater team.
Nice.
And took the mix to a couple of competitions, started getting feedback, not just from my team, but also from like the judges, the audience, just to gauge what that reaction was here. Because for me, it was more of a different audience altogether. It's not the audience that I was used to having back home, but it was a completely different audience with a completely different level of expectations. And soon after that, people started liking what I was producing. Some team
Hmm.
alumni that met me at one of the Ross competitions said, "Hey, I really like the way you blended these two or three songs together." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. That's awesome. I wasn't expecting that reaction, but thank you. I'll take it and I'll move it forward."
Right. Right.
So then my first year as an alumni after graduating, I started doing more team mixes, which was, starting to contract myself as a DJ, musician, producer type of
Hmm.
role to different teams. And a couple of teams reached out, very small time teams. Hey, we just started off a year or two ago. This is our first
Hmm.
mix. We want to bring you in as a newcomer as well so we can collaborate.
Right.
The second and third year after I graduated, that kind of blew up into the entire Ross scene.
Hmm.
So, which was very interesting for me because I went from doing one team, which was my home team, to doing maybe three teams the first year as an alumni. Then
Hmm.
the second and third year as an alumni, I was doing 25 teams a season.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
And it was
And they
all
were all
mostly
Ross.
Ross,
Right.
80-20 split between Ross and Fusion, right? So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
these were teams that were competing multiple competitions throughout the year,
Yeah.
some in the fall, some in the spring, all of that. But yeah, averaging 25 teams a season for 2 seasons was pretty hectic. So that's where the entire G-TAM brand I would say exploded,
Right.
right?
Okay.
Before that, it was just like, oh yeah, there's this guy I know. He does mixes. Let's
Yeah.
get him, right? It was
Yeah.
one of those. And then after those 2 seasons, teams would contact me before the season even ended, being like, "Hey,
Hmm.
I know it's January, but are you available in the fall of this year for our next season?" And I'm
Okay.
like, I don't even know if I'm going to make it to the fall with mixing and everything because I have my own projects going on. So
Right.
there was a lot of those interesting conversations there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
That makes
then,
sense because it's like once you fall into it, you just fall into it, and it's
yep,
like there's just more and more coming. Right.
exactly. Once one team catches wind of, hey, this team's mix was amazing at this competition,
Right.
at that time, mixes were not released until a month after the season ended. Videos were
Mm.
hidden. You'd have to do like the whole, like, for lack of a better way to put it, like direct to VCD types
Yeah.
of
Of course.
recording on your phone and then watching it with your team in your practice to be like, hey, they did this something differently, and how can
Right.
we
Right.
make ours better than that, right? So there used to be that whole
Right.
culture.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's hilarious. Third to VCD style. Right.
direct to VCD style, man.
Right. Right. That's hilarious. Okay. Nice.
So after that, I started just branching out into doing stuff that I liked, right? Which is,
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be a Bollywood song. It doesn't have to
Hmm.
be a Gujarati song or a Tamil
Of
song.
course.
Like we can do some Afro beats, we can do some
Yeah.
Bhangra, right? So I
Hmm.
would do a lot of those experimental tunes at the time,
Hmm. Hmm.
not knowing really what I was doing. So it was just kind of play by ear for me.
Okay. Okay.
And soon there, at that point, I met one of my very first mentors. He goes by the name Classics.
Hmm.
He's an OG from back in the day. He primarily does a lot of Bhangra team mixes.
Hmm.
And he gave me a couple of coaching lessons in terms of how I could bring out more dynamics, more, listener engagement, as
Hmm.
opposed to just song A plus song B, right? So that's where I
Hmm.
started.
Hmm.
And soon enough, I grasped that knowledge from him, started experimenting in the ways he taught me,
Hmm.
and I was starting to do my own line of mixes. Okay, I feel like
Nice.
I want to do this one, like, melodic song. It's
Hmm.
not going to be a banger. It's going to be
Okay.
one of those like tum hi ho type of songs,
Hmm.
sort of thing, right? So I started experimenting in various genres within music.
Nice,
And soon enough,
nice.
I started putting out my own mixes, my own mashups on SoundCloud, on other platforms like AudioMac, Audius, so on
Hmm.
Mixcloud, all of that. And that's essentially where the whole journey started for me, which was probably 2012, 2013.
Right, right. And getting starting off, I mean, with mixing back in middle school to then mixing really, in some regard, professionally, right, with dance
Yep.
teams and going through that path, then and then doing it by yourself, right? And let's talk through that. What I'm curious about, I wanted to like kind of clarifying questions I'm curious about is when would you say so? It's like mostly started with Gujarati music, right? And because you were helping Ross teams, when did potentially Tamil music or even South Indian music broadly enter any of the mixes? Did they at all? I know you briefly mentioned it, but did they at all? And what did that look like for you during the
Yeah.
dance
So
circuit time?
during the dance circuit time, I think it was probably 2013. There was a lot of Ras songs that had like a very kutu beat type of
Hmm.
backbeat. So my mind being the South Indian, I'm like, oh, I know there's this one Tamil song that can mix with this. No one's gonna
Right.
know if I just take the beat and put it here,
Yeah.
and the team's gonna think that oh, it looks good, it sounds good, and then you
Yeah.
throw a layer of hip hop on top of it so that it looks like it's a cohesive unit. So
Right.
that's where I started looking at Tamil music. And during
Mm.
this time, I would go to India every year for like
Right.
summer vacations, right? So it would be like
Of
maybe a
course.
month, 3 weeks, something like that.
Right.
So I would talk to a lot of these stores that would play like Tamil music, especially in
Yeah.
Chennai and Coimbatore. So if you
Yeah.
think back, Music World used to be a big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back in Chennai, Spencer Plaza, even Sai Baba
Oh,
Colony, and all of that kind of stuff, right? There would be all
I
of that
actually,
stuff there.
so I didn't go, I didn't spend much time there. I would just visit. And even then,
Okay.
I would just spend time in the village. So, you would love some context. What is Music World? Is that like
Okay.
a music shop? Is the Music World like a music shop?
Yeah. Yeah, so Music World was basically kind of like your Radio Shack, but for music only.
Okay, okay,
So they used to
nice.
sell like CDs and cassette tapes back in early 2000s, mid
Okay.
90s for all the new albums that would come out.
Oh wow. Okay,
So
nice.
I remember, I think I was 19 when I went to my first shop there,
Hmm.
and I picked up all of the ARM cassettes and CDs.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this was like your Tal, Kadalan,
Right.
Roja, all of those type of movies, right? And I would just
That's
like listen to
incredible.
them. And I
Yeah.
pressured my aunt, who was working in Thailand at the time, to buy me a
Right.
Walkman, like a CD Walkman, so I could listen
Okay.
to these on the go. So that's
Oh
how
wow.
I
Okay.
developed that, and that's how I got my first foot in the door with Tamil music.
Sure.
Since then, I've just been collecting a whole discography of it, and
Okay.
right now I have my own collection of all the Tamil movies audio albums from
Yeah.
2001 until 2023. So, like I said, Music World was is basically a record store, kind of where you could buy your cassette tapes and CDs for all the latest albums that came out
Nice.
during that time. So, would pressure my mom to be like, "Hey, I would like all of these 25 CDs," and she's like, "What are you gonna do with them?" I'm like, "Listen to them. What else am I gonna do with them?"
Of course.
So,
Of course.
started that, and then so we started finding folks within the musical industry back then to be like, hey, I'm interested in music. What does your academy offer? So on and so forth. So I would try to like plug myself in there.
Nice.
Didn't really work out for me because I would only be there for a couple of weeks or a couple of
Right.
months, right, at a time.
Right.
It's not like you're there full time.
Yeah.
But, since then, having that consistent kind of Tamil music feeding in, right, for
Hmm.
me,
Hmm.
I've started evolving my music to become more Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, Konkani oriented in some way.
Right.
Because a lot of
Right.
the times when people listen to my music, they'll look at it as, oh, it's a Bollywood song, but hey, what was that sound effect you used here, right?
Hey. Hey.
And it'll be like one of those like Uruma Melam, it's like kind of thing, right? And you're just like, yeah, that's South Indian stuff, right? That we start
Hey.
bringing in. So
Hey.
I'll start bringing that in
Okay.
various components into my music. And
Nice.
now the way I look at music is always very, very broad spectrum, which is okay, what is the genre we're going for? Is it
Hmm.
going to be melodic? Is it going to be kutta music? Is it going to be kind of your yake tiri type of club music, right? Like
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. And then based on that, I start to bring in different components that I think might work. And
Hmm.
again, it's not always a hit. Sometimes it's a
Yeah.
miss. And like myself, there's many DJs, producers out there in today's world that
Right.
have a folder called unfinished ideas or
Yeah.
to be scrapped, and like 90% of our entire like treasure is inside there, and only 10% is what you'd see on SoundCloud that we think works.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So to that point, thinking about all these unfinished treasures, but you thinking like, okay, you started incorporating Tamil music slowly but surely, and people started to recognize your South Indian beats in general. When would you say was your first like proper either Tamil full Tamil mix or first time it was like, okay, I'm including a Tamil song and I'm very clear that it's a Tamil song that's being included in here.
Yeah, I would say my first one was probably 2014.
Okay.
I did a mixtape for a dance competition called Tufan Entertainment. They're located
Mm,
in Northwestern University here in
right.
Evanston, Illinois. So
Right.
they requested me to make a mixtape.
Okay.
And that's when I started saying, okay, enough of the behind the scenes with Tamil music. I'm just going to put a Tamil mashup out there. Let's see how it works.
Nice.
Right.
Okay.
So I started doing that. Then I did one for Bollywood America back then, which is like a national level competition, and I did more Tamil songs there. And then
Nice.
2014 was that year where I just broke it out and said, okay, enough of keeping these as treasures. Let's
Yeah.
break it out to the audience. And I started
Incredible.
receiving good feedback because I was like, hey, these two songs work well, and it wasn't just like
Right.
your kind of regular what I quote like the mainstream Tamil music, which is
Sure.
basically aligned to like your kuttu music, right? It wasn't that. It was
Yeah.
more like melodic. It was more like hip hop. It was more
Right.
trance techno. It was very
Mm,
different versions of Tamil music that we could say, hey, Tamil music can also sound like this, right? So I was trying to
hmm.
bring out that different angle with Tamil music because for the larger Indian community here, when they look at it as South Indian music, all they think of it is dabangut. They don't look at it beyond that.
Right. Right. And even then, it's not like Dapankut is like very much accepted. It's still very much like at least before a decade ago, it was very much an afterthought. Still at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of times what they would hear would be, oh, Dabangutu is a copy of Tapori style music, right? So they would,
Mm,
let me take an example. They would take like Gandhi Bat to be the true Tapori style. And then you put
mm,
like Dangamari Udari kind of song after that. They'd be
yeah.
like, oh, they copied this from, Gandhi Bat or so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Like they would always make that comparison. But
Yeah.
now I think the culture has shifted and the mindset
Hmm.
has also shifted, saying, okay, it's originating from South India, it's originating
Hmm.
from like Tamil music or Kannada music, and then it's coming to
Hmm.
Bollywood in some way.
Right, right, right. And I think that's so key, right? Like, and that's you, that's Shreemix, that's Margit, that's everybody else in the circuit, right?
Hmm.
That started to push that forward, right? And I appreciate you guys doing that. So then, how did I'm curious? So that was like what Tamil music was like for you in the circuit, but I know you started talking about kind of after the circuit,
Yep.
after you were starting to create songs for yourself. What did that look like, right? Was that just in general, like any types of music? Was that more Tamil music, more South Indian music? How did that evolve for you?
I think the evolution for me was a little bit different from like what you would expect from a regular artist's evolution, right? You start
Okay.
off with one genre, you expand to different
Yep.
genres one by one. I
Yep.
started playing around with different genres. Like whatever I would feel at that moment
Mm,
in time, I would start creating. It
mm-hmm.
didn't have to be a Tamil song. It didn't have to be an English song. It could have been like an
Mm,
Afrobeat song, right? So I would start to
mm-hmm.
implement all of those kind of things. Um,
Nice.
I think one of the interesting collaborations that I had was when I first released this track called Animalarum, which was a
Mm,
combination of Martin Garrix's Animals, which was a hit
okay.
song, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
mixed it with Total Pumalarum.
Nice. I was gonna ask. I was like, when you
Yeah.
said it, I was like, what songs? And then you said animal, and I was like, Malarum? Like, which one is that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I built the initial framework of that. Then I reached
Nice.
out to my co-producer DJ Shreemix at the time, and he was like, "Yo, man, this is hype. I'm down to collab on this." So we both
So
collaborated on that, and we ended up with a very different trap remix of Total Pumalarum that nobody had heard with
nice.
animals, and they were like, "What did you both cook up in the studio here?" Right? That was the reaction, but then it
Right.
went well overall.
Nice. 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 So when was this? And is this still out? Is this on SoundCloud
Yeah,
today?
it's still on my SoundCloud.
Yeah.
This was, I think, 7, 8 years ago. My SoundCloud
Oh,
has been down a couple of times, so it's just been like re-uploading. The
yeah.
usual artist grievances that we have.
Of course. Of course. It's. I don't think it's ever easy, right? To put
Yeah,
out creations like that out there. I mean, I've heard from you and from others on that part. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that was probably like the first ever solo single that I would have
Mhm.
said I released with a collaborator on there, just to put out to say Tamil music can be hype
Mhm.
outside of South Indian type of beats, right?
Right. Right. Which
And
again, it's like you're saying it can be, and it's like growing up Tamil, right? Like we all know it can be hype, right? We've
yeah.
heard like Ilayaraja songs from the 80s, 90s,
Oh
Shivaji,
yeah.
Ganeshan songs, MGR songs that, and then SBB, even Unni Krishnan, Hari Haran, like yo, these songs are hype. It just like hasn't hit the mainstream, even within the South Asian continent. There,
Exactly. And that was one of the biggest motivators for me to be like, I know it can be hype. You know
right?
it can be hype because you have that Tamil like background.
Yeah.
But to somebody who's just listening to it, how do I make or how do I convince them that it can be hype, right? So that was kind of like
Mm,
my main driving factor to say, let's take Tamil music in a very different direction
mhm,
outside of just your dabanguttu type of things, right? Like, of course, that's
mm,
always going to be there because that's a staple, right? That's what a lot of mainstream Tamil music is like. But how do you take all of these other type of Tamil songs with different Tamil vibes, and how do you generate more curiosity, more interest, and
mhm,
just more passion across maybe non-Tamil speaking folks or even non-South Asian diaspora folks as well, right? So that was
right,
kind of like my motivation to say, let me venture out into these different categories, which is
right.
what I was saying in terms of my evolution with Tamil music was very, very, I wouldn't say helter skelter, but it was very like targeted with different types of genres.
Fair, fair. So where to that point, like fast forward to now, right?
Hmm.
What does that look like for you? What does that mean to you? So I know you're mixing here and there, and I love like seeing when you put out like drafts, right? And you send the drafts, and even of course we'll get to this, but everything you did at the Tamil meetups, especially the hype intro song, which also we'll talk about, right?
Yep.
It's like what is the mixing? What does your DJ career look like now? Here.
So right now with my full-time job as, in strategy consulting at Deloitte, plus also upkeeping my musical hobby, which is
Mm-hmm.
DJing, producing, all of that, you know, I've kind of taken a very more like very very targeted approach in terms of what I would like to put out, who I
Mm-hmm.
work with, and I don't want to boil the ocean in terms of saying, "Hey, you're free, okay, I'll work with you," or "I'm free, hey, work with me." Like I don't want to do that. I want to be very
Mm-hmm.
focused in terms of saying, I have this vision in mind. This vision
Mm,
is going to be this kind of a song. It's going to be a hip hop song with some Tamil lyrics. It could be a cover and so on and so forth. And I'm trying to bring in this kind of a vibe, right? So I talk
mm,
with a lot of different artists that are singers, violinists, mridangam players, tabla players, not just within US, but I've talked with people from Canada, Argentina. I think there
nice,
was one mridangam player that I spoke with from Netherlands, a
nice,
couple of singers from India itself that are also up and coming. And we're
nice.
trying to build these projects which are more indie Tamil music type of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like a good comparison would be think of like Madras gig, right? Like that kind of a vibe is what we're trying to bring in at this point. So
Nice,
I think I have about 5 or 6 projects underway right now.
sweet, sweet. I'm excited to hear them and see them, and then of course share it out to the community as well at some whenever that's ready. There.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Can you give us a sneak peek into one or two of those projects? What they look like or what they sound like?
So one of the I'm not gonna give you the SoundCloud or any of the
Okay,
draft edits in
okay,
this
okay. Sure,
podcast because it's
sure.
under wraps. But
Okay.
one of the tracks that I'm working on is a very, very near and dear heart track to me
Okay.
because this was the first ever melodic song that I really resonated with once I
Mm,
understood what music was. And that
mm,
track
mm,
is Haira 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 Ba from Jeans.
mm. Nice. Okay. I that song itself, just like it. I'm excited. That'll be fun. That'll be fun. Okay.
So I'm doing that, and then I'm working on a different track for my very first Rajnikant, like, how would I say, initiation ceremony track.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure you can guess it. It's from the movie Talabadi.
Of course. Of course. What else? That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. When should we keep our ears out for this? Would you have timelines? Not to put you on the
Uh,
spot, I apologize. But now I'm just excited. I'm excited to hear it. You know?
so I think our Haira Haira Hyderabad track is looking to come out in the fall, closer to Thanksgiving.
Okay.
The Rakama track, we're working on it right now, and it's a work in progress. So we have a longer timeline. So we're expecting spring break next year.
Nice. Okay. Cool. That'll
So
be yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, so these are a little. I know they're a little bit longer timelines, and you're probably excited to be like, "Yo, man, drop this track sooner."
I
But
want this track tomorrow, you know? Like
I'm surprised you didn't ask for it right after this podcast.
I would like for everyone's reference, I probably would have if you hadn't told me the timelines here.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, but then again, while I'm doing this, I'm also doing other tracks like the arrambam intro that we did,
Right,
right?
right,
For
right, right.
that, and then there's one that's coming up for one of my collaborators' mixtapes, doing a very melodic track
Okay.
that is going to be mixed with Drake.
Well, cool. Cool.
So so that I think is coming out at the end of the month, and that's just a simple mashup as part of their mixtape.
Okay.
So that's one of the segments, and I'm working on a different segment to drop alongside that. But
Nice.
I've already created the full versions. Now I'm just trying to make it into a mixtape version.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Okay, I'm hyped to see, and for everyone listening, we will definitely be when those things are ready, we will definitely be sharing it out to the different channels here on behalf of G-TAM as well. So excited to see that. Okay, now I mean you mentioned it, right? So let's jump into it. Let's talk about the arrambam event that we had the opportunity to meet that you flew in from Chicago to come DJ, right? And then you
Yep.
dropped this epic starting track. You had me also say a few words to like start it off. You were like mic testing, Kamal did and Armbi Kalama, and then you dropped it. So I don't want to steal your thunder. You like talk us through the experience, what it meant to you, how it was to you, and then talk us through that mix there as well.
Yeah. So growing up, when I was in Coimbatore in my very, very infanthood versus in my childhood, adolescenthood in Zambia, there was always that one Tamil channel, Sun TV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And every morning at 11 a.m. or every evening at 7 p.m., they would have this theme music that would play. And that
Right.
theme music would basically lead into kind of breaking news or, kind of the primetime movie on your Friday night, Saturday night.
Mm-hmm.
So that has
Mm-hmm.
always been one of those iconic theme songs that I could just never get over. And I have been waiting for a chance to use this in
Okay.
some of my DJ sets or some of my musical productions, right? And when you called me up for saying, "Hey, we're doing this Tamil meetup, we want you to come and DJ," I thought, this is it. This is where I'm going to use this song. So leading up to the event, right? It was 3 weeks before the Tamil meetup with in New York.
Yeah.
I was sitting here at my desk and I'm like, how would I incorporate this? I went through, I think, 6 or 7 different iterations.
Hmm.
And then finally I decided to be like, wait a minute, I already have this other track that I made before, which was from the song Chandralekha
All right.
from Tirda Tirda, which was a 90s like movie. And I said, wait a minute, let's put these two together and see how it works.
Okay.
So I was actually in New York the morning of the show,
Yeah.
and I was on my laptop trying to just sequence my tracks and everything for the evening meetup. And I was like, let me just put this together. So I put it together,
Hmm.
threw in the backbeat, and I was like, okay, let's see how this works. And I played it for the person I was staying with, which was also the other DJ for the night, Morgan.
Of course. Of course.
And he goes, yo, this is fire. You should drop it. I'm like, all right, sounds good.
All
I'm
right.
not gonna tell Hari anything. I'm just gonna play it. And then when we got to the venue, I had that queued up, but I was not going to release it until you had said your opening remarks for the dance floor.
All right.
And then when that came on, you tell me what was your reaction when you heard that.
Yo, I remember I was like, I stepped to the side. We had just finished the artist showcase, and I was just like on my phone. I think I was trying to like text one of the artists or something of that sorts. And then you threw it on, and then I just heard the Sun TV theme song go off, and I was like, "What is going on?" And I remember like distinctly like looking up and looking around to be like, "Are we here? Like, is this real?" And I remember looking up. I mean, it was you and Ram in the booth, and I was like, "Yo, what is going on?" You know? Yeah, it was insane. And then people like we haven't released it yet, which I think since we're recording this and since we're talking about it, we'll have to release. I have the video from the videographer of that moment, right? Like when the dance floor started and then people's reactions. And it's just like the buildup is real, and then people just go crazy when the
Yeah.
beat drops, right?
Yeah.
That's
We
awesome.
had to make something epic, man. This was, for you it was a big event, and
Yeah,
for me it was my first time doing this. So
right.
we wanted to make sure that the people enjoyed it and it became a memorable experience for everyone,
Absolutely.
right?
And I think it was, right? And I appreciate you putting that into it because I think to that point, being Tamil, like, I mean, you grew up in Coimbatore in some regard or being back a lot. I would go back a lot. I never grew up there or spent any time, meaningful amount of time there. But when you'd be at home and the TV was on, the thing you could
Yep.
consistently hear was the Sun TV theme song
Yep.
when they were like, it's news, right? And I forget exactly
Yep.
what they say, right? But it's like the same saying. And I think you had that in the mix,
We
if I
did. We
remember
did have
correctly.
it in the mix. That was the
Right,
the final part of the intro, which was like he'll say a couple of words in Tamil, and then
right,
after that it'll go straight into like an EDM like ad hoc transition, and people will just be like,
right,
"Huh? Wait, what? This guy just dropped this?" Like, I saw some facial reactions when I was playing it,
right.
despite all the lights and things that were going on, and people in the
Yeah.
front row were just like, "Oh shit, it's Sun TV, it's Sun TV. I don't know what he's gonna do next." And then it's like goes straight into the '90s.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, everyone knows it, right? Like, if you know Tamil music, you know one Chandralekha. That's a song that everyone knows. But also, it's like, again, we don't need to beat the dead horse, but everyone knows the Sun TV theme song. So
Exactly.
it
Yeah.
just hits. It just hits. So let's talk through that more, right? So you said that's your first time DJing like an event like this, right? So it's the first time like Tamil people, and you said this at the start, Tamil people partying until 5 a.m. in the morning. So how was
Yep.
that experience for you? What was like after mixing Tamil songs into Gujarati songs without anyone knowing to creating your mixes to a Tamil party in New York City? How was that for you?
I would say it was mind blowing. I think I myself was very, very elated, and I felt like, you know, I was in the gracious presence of the audience. Like I felt like I
Mm,
was that guy. Like I'm glad you guys are here enjoying, and I'm
right.
able to provide to that. Right. That's how humbling I felt.
Yeah.
And I was ready to just unleash, and I think I just went completely straight up to be like, okay, we're just gonna go straight to all the Tamil library that I've saved up all this time, and
Yeah.
this is exactly that I want. this audience to experience,
Right.
right? So I was playing a couple of mashups, I was playing a couple of remixes, I was playing some straight up regular songs, like your very popular songs, for example, Why This Colaverity.
Of course. Of course.
And then of course at that time the one hit song was Dane Murray.
Right. Right. Everyone goes hard for Thane Muli, right? They still do, in
Yep.
some sense. Yeah.
So I worked with one of a DJ from India, and he produced the main thing. I was kind of a ghost producer in that sense. I was just working on the beat lineup and that kind of stuff for him.
Yeah.
So we made a EDM version of Ten Murray. So
Nice.
I dropped that like halfway through the set just to reset to see what the crowd is gonna look like. And after that, right around that time was when the song "Nah Ready" from
Yeah.
Leo came out.
Right.
So of course we had to drop the music and ask the crowd if they were ready, and then of course we played "Not Ready" and we went with it.
We went with it, dude. That was just a chaos night in a good way of just like
Yep.
everything was just hitting and everything was just like just going so hard there.
Yeah. No, I definitely. And whenever you guys have your next one and you guys
Yeah.
need someone to hype it up, always feel free to reach out, man. Happy to always
Yeah.
come down to New York.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said. It's like in the presence of the audience, right? Because I would say the audience is what makes a difference. So, side note to everyone listening, you'll likely hear this from the artists who are performing, who all of them will have on the show itself, right? And so you guys will hear it from them. But they also talk about how that was their first time performing just a full, as musicians, full Tamil sets, right? Tamil songs, and what their remarkable takeaway from that experience was also in the same way, like Shivani has mentioned, it's like she was standing there singing and there was like a group of Tamil people right in front of her in the audience who were just hyping her up, and that got her even more hype. And I think it's that same energy of like, okay, yes, we're here playing the music, and it's not a question of, hey, what is this song? It's oh, we love this song, we know it already, we're all Tamil, and or we know Tamil music, right? And it's just like we're here for the energy, for the vibe that's being created. So again, appreciate you creating that vibe, and appreciate the community for making this possible, that we can bring
Yep.
together musicians like this, right?
Of course, man. Yeah, and that's the beauty of what you guys are doing. That's one thing that I've always admired. Even when you contacted me to say, "Hey, would you like to come DJ this?" We had a lot of back and forth, which was just like, "Hey, what's going on? What do you have in mind? What's the
Yeah,
planning looking like?" And when you said, "Hey, we're bringing in artists that are singing Tamil songs," I was like, "Yes, I'm in."
right,
Doesn't matter what the ROI is. I'm just like,
right.
I'm here for this.
Right. And we're gonna continue to do more of that, and that's very much the goal. And hopefully we can bring it to other cities, and especially with you being Chicago, I think that's also an awesome opportunity to potentially figure out if we can bring even at a smaller scale, or hopefully the same scale, to Chicago too at some point in time.
There's a crowd here waiting for you, man. There's a crowd
Yeah,
here waiting for you. Trust me.
yeah,
We just did a different event that came
yeah,
from New York here,
right,
and that sold out on about a week before the event. And there
yeah,
were people texting us like on the day of asking us, "Hey, can we get in tickets?"
right,
So there's
right,
always
right.
a crowd here. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, we'll have to make it happen. It has to be possible, right? It has to be
it
possible.
does.
Yeah, that's incredible. Nice. So I know we're quartering around an hour here, so I think I'll ask like a few more. So side note,
Yeah.
I'll ask a few more questions, and
Hmm.
then I have some lightning, like rapid fire questions at the end for you that are going to be a surprise. And then just to keep you on your feet, and then we'll wrap it up. I'm trying to keep these episodes around like an hour and 15. There
Okay.
for your
Yeah.
reference. Yeah.
No worries.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Cool. Okay, incredible, right? We will definitely have to bring it out to Chicago, and I mean, of course, other cities too, right? But I think Chicago, you're right. Like, there is a lot of Tamil friends I have there, and it's just a matter of time. Some of them have flown out to New York for events similar to you, right? But I think it's just a matter of time until we can get it out there and make it happen. So, one other question I think now, right, with you mixing and then DJing and then coming seeing this, from your opinion, I'm just curious. You seeing this over the course of a better more than a decade right now, how has the Tamil music scene evolved, at least within, let's say, America or just broadly for you and in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think I want to break that out into two parts, right?
Okay.
I want to talk about it. How does it evolved broadly first, and then how has it evolved within the North American continent?
Hmm.
So broadly, I think Tamil music has become much more popular when you have music directors like ARR and Anirudh, right, that are pushing the boundaries to not just make it South India, but make it Pan India,
Right.
right? And they're now releasing multiple versions of the same song. So, for example, Jai Ho, it came out in Hindi, it came out in Tamil. Very
Yeah.
recently, from the movie Jawan, the
Yeah.
song Chaleya,
Yeah.
Anirudh dropped it in Hindi, he dropped it in Tamil,
Right.
right? The same thing with Natu Natu, right?
Yeah.
Iconic song. Went out in Hindi, came in Tamil, came in Telugu, right? So a lot of that, how would I say, like that distinction between this is a Bollywood song, this is a Collywood song, this is a Tollywood song, all those lines are blurred now.
Mm.
Because
Fair.
broadly speaking, within India, the music industry has evolved to now make it to say it's a pan India song.
Right.
Of course, there's going to be those nuances where a song is always going to be truly respected in its original language,
Of course.
right? So that's one thing that I always take into consideration whenever I'm mixing a song, right? So,
Hmm.
for example, one of the songs that I'm working towards in terms of mixing is the song Urvasi Urvasi from Kadala,
Hmm. Yeah. Great
right?
song.
But for me, I just cannot look at the Hindi version or a Telugu version. I have to look at the Tamil version because
Of
that's
course.
the true source of the song, right?
Yeah.
So broadly speaking, pan India songs are now becoming a new thing.
Hmm.
Secondly, there's a lot of adoption, right? When you go on Instagram, all your reels, all your TikToks, all your other YouTube shorts and things like that, wherever there's social media presence, you can see there's a lot of dance covers that are being done by not
Hmm.
just Indians, but
Yeah.
also like non-Indians.
Right.
Like I've seen songs that are, really popular and they're being done by some of my friends that have friends, from Africa or
Hmm.
Europe or Russia or Australia, whatever it may be, right? And it's a
Hmm.
completely different choreography, completely different style.
Right.
So that's how I think it's evolved broadly.
Mm.
Within the North American continent, I think there's two sub buckets here. One is the collegiate circuit within
Right.
America. There's a lot more presence here in terms of saying, oh yeah, we need to have like a Kutu song or we need to have a South Indian segment, right?
Hmm.
And right before it used to be one of those where, oh, that's a wow factor. They did something new. Now it's just become part of the formula, right? To
Of course.
get the points or whatever they would need to do to get a placing at that competition, right? So that's
Right.
one aspect of it. But outside of that, even when we play after parties, it's more like you can play any like Tamil song, Telugu song, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Especially Tamil songs that are very well known, those are a hit. Doesn't matter who the audience is at an after party with a collegiate circuit. Everybody knows that song because everybody wants to use that song, but nobody is like, oh my god, if I use this song, am I copying the other team? Right? There's all of
Right.
that stuff, but they
Right.
hear it at
Right.
an after party. It's there. So that's one
Nice.
aspect. The second aspect is independent artists are now having that courage and
Hmm.
they have that entrepreneurship to be like, I'm going to do a song cover of this famous Tamil song,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So, for example, the new song that came out, Kavala from Jailer,
Right.
right? There's multiple artists that are now doing different versions of it. One is like an R&B cover, one is
Right.
like a techno cover, so on and so forth. There's that courage that Tamil songs have now inspired,
Right.
whether they're of the Tamil background or not. They're like, oh, this is a good song, I want to appreciate it and I want to do a cover, right? So when
Yeah.
the song inspires and the music and the culture inspires that, I think that itself is a win for us.
Mm, mm. That is remarkable. I love how you've broken that down. I think two immediate reactions. First, to the pan India, pan, I would say, subcontinent music,
Hmm.
right? It's that the fact that it's getting created in Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, whatever it may be. Like, for example, like I think Bahubali had all the different versions, or even
Yep.
RRR, right, has all the different versions. KGF has all the different versions in different languages. It's getting accepted and it's getting known that that's happening, but people know the original song, which I think is, to your point, the
Yep.
most important piece of the puzzle, right?
Exactly.
Because, like, if I think about old songs, right? Urvasi is an example, but the song I think about a lot is Vasigara, right? Vasigara is a Tamil song from the movie, what is it, Minnale, right? Madhavan
Mindale, yeah, man.
Minnale.
It's the
Yeah,
it's the it's the OG heartthrob.
OG. It's the
Yeah.
OG, right? Like that is like an OG movie. That's everyone grew up watching those movies,
Yep.
but it's always hard for me, right? When people hear Zara Zara and when it comes on, one when I've heard that in the clubs or bars before, and it's like Zara Zara goes on, and then Zara Zara is like, oh, this is like, oh, I think it's a Telugu song, but then they start singing in Hindi, and I'm like, okay, that's good. But then people would be like, oh my god, this song is like the best Hindi song, and it's like, yo, no, like
Yeah.
it's originally from Tamil, right? Like,
Yep.
but people don't know that because they didn't care enough or didn't do, let's say, marketing around it, saying, hey, this is originally a Tamil song and it's in Hindi, right? And I think that lack of transparency and in some sense knowledge, right, lack of knowledge that
Hmm.
people have held down, I think, the Tamil music industry or made people look down on it for a long time there.
I think that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is also back then when like Minali came out, which was probably early 2000s, right?
Right.
You had a singer like Bombay Jayashree, who is
Yeah.
known for her Carnatic influence, right?
Right.
She comes in and she drops in this very like seductive, melodic type of track based on the movie's setting, right?
Of course.
So, and then it becomes a hit. Then, you know, every other in movie industry is like, oh, this worked well. Let's copy it and move, copy paste in some
Of
way.
course. Of course.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that has now gone away to a certain extent because they're
Yeah.
using
Yeah.
the same singers like
That's true.
Shreya Ghoshal singing in Tamil, she's singing in Kannada, she's singing in Telugu, Hindi,
Right.
so on and so forth. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's true. The versatility is there, or sorry, the versatility is there for the
Hmm.
artist to go across the languages. Makes sense. And then the last point on the independent like music, right? And they're having the courage to do their own spins is usually those spins are what, let's say, pop off in different segments of the community of like, oh,
Hmm.
some people like the R&B style, some people like the EDM style, and then people who aren't Tamil will discover it, and then they discover the original song, right? So it
Exactly.
serves as a way for like the spreading. I think I don't know, like if this is not the prevalent theory, but there's a theory of like there's like people's opinion of, hey, like we need to stay true to the song, but yes, that is true, but then music is all subjective, right? So
Yep.
I appreciate you saying that, and that means a lot. Okay, so last question that I have for
Hmm.
you before we get into a few rapid fire questions that I have to get to know you better. But the last question is, I know you mentioned this briefly, which was you work at Deloitte as a strategy consultant, but you are still pursuing music. In some sense, I know you mentioned it as a hobby, but with everything you're doing, I mean, it's like it's more than just a hobby. You're doing some real stuff here. What I'm curious about is one, how do you balance everything? What does that look like in your life? And then two, what advice do you have to other, let's say, Tamil creators or creators in general, who, of course, have like professional careers, quote unquote, but also have their creative passions, which I think it seems like you've balanced pretty well here.
That's a good question. So how do I balance the two, right? I could give you the very trolly answer and be like, just don't sleep, right?
Right, right.
But I'll give you the actual answer, which is time management, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
I used to be very loose on my time management, saying, okay, I'll take an extra hour and complete my work, or I'll shorten my dinner and just take it as 15 minutes to grab a subway
Mm-hmm.
versus a full hour, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be very much like that. Now I've become very strict in terms of my time management,
Mm-hmm.
and I've ordered a couple of these time management products from Amazon, like the Pomodoro tomato thing, whatever it may
Right.
be, like that kind of stuff that keeps me on track in terms of
Okay.
how I manage my time, so that by the time my workday ends, which is usually from 7:30 in the morning to about 6 p.m., like once
Mm-hmm.
that's done, I take some time for myself. I just decompress, whether it's a long, walk, a hot shower,
Mm-hmm.
or just like some full out like stairmaster on the gym, for example.
Yeah.
Right? I just take that time for myself, and then I come back and I'm like, okay, I'm with a fresh mind, and I have the next 3 hours, which is going to be my music time.
Mm.
And during that time, it's not that I'm focusing on saying by 3 hours I need to have a mashup done or I need to have a remix done.
Right. Right.
It's more so, let me listen what's out there. If I have an idea, I'll put it together.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that kind of stuff is what I tend to do for myself during the weekdays. During
Right.
the weekends, I typically try to structure my time in such a way that I run my errands, like your usual laundry, grocery, blah blah blah, all of that kind of stuff.
Of
But at the
course.
same time, I'm always looking at time during the afternoon, which is what I call couch time, where I'm just sitting and watching Netflix.
Yeah.
And during that time, like, I've watched a couple of series where I'm like, oh, I really like that beat. How did they make that beat? And then that evening, I'm sitting and I'm researching how they made that beat or what's that song from the Netflix, so that I can be like,
Right.
oh, okay, this is how it is, right? And then
Okay.
that becomes my next to do on my thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's one piece of it. The second piece of it is just like how we all have like a to-do list on a day-to-day basis, which is, for work I have to do these 10 tasks and then I'm done with work. I
Right.
always have a running unfinished mixes to-do list.
Mm. Okay.
That list is never ending, excuse me.
Yeah.
Right, I started off this list in 2010,
Mm-hmm.
and right now I'm at almost 350 ideas.
Mm. Okay.
And it's not that I do one every day. It's just more so whenever that idea comes to me, I just write it down to say, okay, song X plus song Y might be a good idea,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Whenever I get to it, whenever I have the capacity to do it, I do it.
Right.
So with 2024, one of my resolutions was downsize that list back to as low of a number as you can.
Right. And focus
So
on the songs or mixes you care about, I assume. Right.
that's one thing. Well, first, test out the idea, see if it works, see if it doesn't work.
Okay.
Then, secondly, see which ones are you think or I think that are really gonna. It doesn't have to hit. It's just like, is it really embodying what I stand for as a musician, DJ, producer?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
with that, I've kind of come up with an idea to say, this summer, you're going to be the first one to hear it on this
Okay.
podcast.
Nice. Heard it here first, everyone.
Heard it
Heard
here
it here.
first.
Nice.
Dropping the T. There is going
Definitely.
to be a 4 hour back-to-back live set of all my old ideas.
Oh my
That's coming
god.
out this summer on
Oh my
YouTube.
god. On YouTube. Oh my god. Okay. Okay.
So I'm just working with my team right now to see how do I break it out. Should I do one
Okay.
hour segments or should I just do 4 hours straight? But
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Heard it
You
here, folks. Heard it here.
heard it here
Okay.
first.
Nice. I like it. I like it. Okay. Okay. So that makes sense, right? Like that balance is key, right? Of the
Yep,
creative side with your professional side and also your personal life. Because if you let that slip in any way, shape, or form, you're not going to be whole.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Nice. I appreciate you sharing that. Okay. To the rapid fire questions.
All
I
right.
have, well, one question which you kind of answered and in different parts is it was going to be a what's next for G-TAM. But like holistically, if you were to say that in like a, say like one sentence of like, okay, this is the vision or mission of like what's next for you, what is that there?
It's going to be the discography of GTAM that has
Okay,
never been shown to anyone. That's coming out probably towards the end of summer this year,
nice.
followed by two independent releases, which was Haira 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 Ba and the Talabali song. So that's right now on the horizon.
Okay,
But that's not to say that something else could creep up in the middle.
yeah, but that's the big things. Okay,
Those are the
uh,
big three things right now.
nice. Okay, cool, sweet. Okay, next rapid fire question is: what is the inspiration behind the name G-TAM? How did that come about? Your DJ names or mixer name, however you want to think about it. How did that come about?
So my name is pronounced Gautam.
Yeah.
In the non-Indian American culture, I get a very different set of versions of it. I go from Guatemala to Guatem to Gotham, like Gotham City Batman, to everything. So I don't know what it is, but to make it easier for everyone to say, hear, understand, what I did is I just shortened the first two letters of my first name, which is
Yeah.
Gautam, to make it just GTAM.
G-TAM. Okay, nice. And it just stuck.
It just stuck. I think I got this. I was talking with, I think, a couple of college buddies back in 2008, and that's where the name came from, GTAM.
G-TAM. Okay. Okay. Nice. Sweet. That's a cool. I have also a friend whose name is high school friend Gautam, and it's like hearing all the different pronunciations is wild. But also,
Yep.
like eventually, we started. Me and my other friend Karthik, we would start calling him all the different pronunciations too, because that's what we kept hearing. You know, even though we
Yep.
knew it's like pronounced the right way, we were still, yeah. That's the influence. Okay. Last rapid fire question is this is, of course, inspired from Tim Ferriss. So if you watch the Tim Ferriss podcast, you'll know this one, right? But the question is, if you had the opportunity to put anything on a billboard on the side of a highway, right, that a million people would see every single day, what would you want it to say?
Ooh, that's a loaded question, man. But okay, in rapid fire terms, I would say follow your passion and listen to those that are in line with your passion.
Mm, yeah, nice. I like it. I
Like
like it.
weed out the noise and just listen to those that you truly believe support your passion.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I admire that because from everything that we've heard today, you've all you've been doing in a good way is following your passion, right? And just letting that take you, and you're continuing to do that. So incredible to hear your journey, hear your story, the origin story of Gotham City's GTAM, right?
Yep, there you go.
There you go. But excited to hear, and I'm excited for the summer, the 4 hour release, and of course the two new songs and anything else that comes in. But appreciate you being on the show and appreciate you joining us.
Yep, no, definitely, happy to be here. There was one question that you asked that I don't think I answered, like how am I going to inspire the upcoming generation? So I just want to take quick 30
For sure.
seconds on that.
Let's do it.
I think upcoming generations, there's a very different way of them learning music versus the way some of my generation folks learned it, right? There's nothing wrong, but I think reach out, get feedback, accept constructive criticism because that's the best way you're going to learn. Whether it's good, bad, ugly, or the person that you reached out to didn't really criticize you or give you feedback the way you expected it, that's fine. You move on to the next person and you get the criticism from them, right? Like, or the feedback. And that's one thing that, I wish I was told earlier because had I known that, I would have reached out to at least 20 other people.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Fair.
So that's just something that, don't give up, just keep pushing. And, I have co founded DDN Sound, which is a mentorship program
Okay.
for, up and coming musicians, DJs, producers, whatever it may be, to get feedback on their new mixes. And, through what I helped co-found, there's a lot of, younger DJs that are now coming in asking, hey, does this look right? Does this sound right? And we give the feedback. We're like, we don't just say, nah, bro, this is whack. We say, okay, this is good, but here's where you're lacking. If you
Yeah.
improve these three things, your mix is going to be 10x better.
Right. Right. Right.
Yep.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I would love to, if you're up for that, we'll share that link to the mentorship program if you have like either an Instagram or a website on the YouTube video description. So we'll add it.
Yeah, we just have an Instagram. Just follow at DDN Sound on Instagram.
Okay, sweet, sweet. Love it, man. That's incredible. I think there's more to that, and there needs to be more initiatives like that to help support the next generation. So glad you're pioneering and spearheading that there.
Yep, for sure, man. No worries.
Excellent. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Gautam. And we'll talk to everyone soon, and appreciate all of you staying with us and listening to the show. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you all for joining in. And thank you, Hari and team, for putting this together. Much appreciated. And thank you for inviting me as a guest.
Absolutely. Let's do it. Cool.
All right.
Sweet.